When American infantry began arriving in large numbers on European battlefields during World War II, German soldiers quickly realized they were facing something different. While the Wehrmacht respected British professionalism and acknowledged Soviet resilience, many German accounts revealed a distinct wariness toward American ground troops. This fear was not rooted in myth or propaganda alone. It developed through repeated battlefield encounters that demonstrated the Americans' unique combination of firepower, logistics, aggression, and adaptability. Early assumptions among German commanders painted US soldiers as inexperienced and overly reliant on material superiority. However, those assumptions eroded as American units demonstrated an ability to absorb punishment, reorganize rapidly, and counterattack with overwhelming force. Unlike some other Allied forces, American infantry divisions operated within a system that emphasized mobility, combined arms coordination, and aggressive small unit leadership. German troops discovered that engagements with American forces rarely remained static. US infantry constantly probed for weak points and exploited breakthroughs with speed. Even when stalled, they responded with artillery barrages and air support on a scale that few armies in history had ever coordinated so efficiently. Over time, this pattern created a psychological effect. German soldiers understood that once Americans fixed their position, an avalanche of shells, tanks, and aircraft would likely follow. That certainty, the inevitability of escalating force, bred a particular kind of fear, one rooted in experience rather than exaggeration. One of the primary reasons German troops feared American infantry was the sheer volume and precision of US artillery support. American doctrine placed extraordinary emphasis on artillery coordination, and by 1944, US forces had perfected rapid-fire response systems that could bring devastating barrages within minutes. German veterans frequently remarked that fighting Americans meant enduring relentless shelling. US forward observers, equipped with reliable radios, could call in fire missions with remarkable speed. This technological advantage allowed American infantry units to compensate for inexperience or difficult terrain by overwhelming opposition through firepower. In contrast, British artillery was also formidable, but American responsiveness became legendary among German troops. The knowledge that any firefight might trigger concentrated artillery fire created hesitation within German ranks. Infantry engagements that might have been manageable against other forces became catastrophic when American units escalated the fight with massed guns. German soldiers learned that holding positions against US infantry required enduring not just rifle and machine gun fire, but coordinated barrages capable of flattening defensive lines. This systemic integration of infantry and artillery created a battlefield environment where German tactical skill often struggled against industrial-scale firepower. Another major factor was American logistical superiority. German troops were accustomed to supply shortages, especially as the war dragged on. By contrast, US infantry rarely lacked ammunition, food, or equipment. German soldiers noted that American units seemed endlessly supplied, capable of sustaining prolonged engagements without exhaustion of resources. This abundance translated into battlefield confidence. American infantry could afford to fire generously, maneuver aggressively, and rotate units efficiently. While British forces also possessed strong logistics, the scale of American production and transport stunned German observers. Trucks, fuel, replacement troops, and medical evacuation systems operated with remarkable consistency. German troops understood that defeating a US unit rarely meant eliminating its combat capability permanently. Reinforcements and supplies would soon restore its strength. This created a strategic pessimism among Wehrmacht soldiers. Fighting Americans often felt like confronting a force that could absorb losses indefinitely. The psychological weight of facing an opponent backed by the world's largest industrial economy intensified German fear, especially as their own supply lines deteriorated under Allied bombing campaigns. American infantry culture also played a role in shaping German perceptions. US soldiers were often aggressive at the squad level, encouraged to take initiative rather than wait for rigid orders. German doctrine valued discipline and structure, but by the later years of the war, many units were composed of hastily trained replacements. In contrast, American non-commissioned officers were empowered to make rapid decisions. This flexibility created unpredictable battlefield behavior. German troops found that American patrols probed defenses constantly, launching local attacks that kept pressure on defensive lines. While British forces were respected for methodical planning, American infantry displayed a more relentless tempo in certain sectors. This aggressiveness, combined with heavy support weapons, gave the impression of unstoppable momentum. German veterans sometimes described Americans as dangerous amateurs early in the war, but by 1944 that label had shifted to reluctant admiration. The combination of confidence, numbers, and firepower created a formidable presence. Air-ground coordination further amplified German fear. American infantry did not fight alone. They operated under skies increasingly dominated by Allied aircraft. Close air support, especially after D-Day, meant that German troop movements during daylight became hazardous. U.S. infantry units could mark targets for fighter bombers, resulting in devastating strikes against armored or entrenched positions. The psychological impact of air power cannot be overstated. German soldiers knew that once American forces identified their location, bombs and rockets might soon follow. While British and Canadian forces also benefited from air superiority, the scale of U.S. air-ground integration reinforced the image of Americans as backed by overwhelming power. This constant threat from above eroded morale and limited German tactical options. Major reason Germans feared American infantry was their ability to learn quickly from mistakes. Early encounters in North Africa revealed weaknesses in U.S. tactics, particularly during battles like Kasserine Pass. German commanders initially viewed American troops as inexperienced and tactically immature. However, what surprised them was the speed at which American units adapted. Within months, U.S. forces restructured leadership, improved coordination between armor and infantry, and corrected earlier errors. German troops were accustomed to enemies who repeated patterns, but Americans adjusted rapidly after setbacks. This adaptability made them unpredictable. By the time of the Normandy invasion, American infantry units demonstrated far greater tactical competence than they had just 2 years earlier. German soldiers began to realize that fighting Americans meant facing an opponent that improved with every engagement. This learning curve reduced any early advantage the Wehrmacht may have held. Unlike some adversaries who relied heavily on rigid doctrine, U.S. forces emphasized after-action reviews and flexible command. German veterans later admitted that the Americans they faced in 1944 were far more formidable than those of 1942. That steady evolution fostered caution, and eventually fear. The personal firepower carried by American infantry also contributed to German anxiety. U.S. squads were heavily equipped with semi-automatic M1 Garand rifles, giving American soldiers a higher rate of fire compared to the standard German Kar-98K bolt-action rifle. Though German units had excellent machine guns like the MG-42, the widespread distribution of semi-automatic rifles among American troops increased overall squad firepower. In close combat situations, this advantage became noticeable. German soldiers reported that American infantry could deliver rapid, sustained rifle fire that pinned defenders effectively. Additionally, U.S. units were generously supplied with submachine guns, Browning automatic rifles, bars, grenades, and anti-tank weapons like the bazooka. This layered firepower made each squad highly lethal. Unlike forces that depended heavily on centralized support weapons, American infantry units often carried enough firepower to win local engagements independently. German troops understood that even small American patrols could pose serious threats. The perception of facing well-armed, confident soldiers heightened battlefield tension. Morale and rotation policies further distinguished American infantry. While German divisions were frequently left on the front lines for extended periods, suffering exhaustion and attrition, U.S. forces rotated units more effectively when possible. Access to rest areas, hot meals, mail delivery, and medical evacuation improved overall morale. German soldiers, increasingly cut off from home and suffering supply shortages, noticed this difference. American infantry appeared better fed, better clothed, and physically stronger as the war progressed. This physical robustness translated into combat endurance. The ability to sustain offensive operations without collapsing under fatigue impressed and worried German defenders. In contrast, many Wehrmacht units by 1944 were under strength and composed of very young or older replacements. Facing fresh American divisions supported by abundant resources created a psychological imbalance that German troops felt acutely. The American approach to combined arms warfare also made engagements particularly dangerous. Infantry did not operate in isolation. Tanks, engineers, artillery, and air support were closely integrated. When German forces counterattacked, they often found themselves